Best ball drafting has exploded in recent years. That has brought in a lot more ways to play, and it's brought in a lot more players. And both of those factors means you need to think more about how you're drafting your best ball teams. Matt Schauf, Jared Smola of DraftSharks.com here today to talk to you about just that thing. And we're going to start with some basics for winning in best ball. And Jared, I think that has to begin with tailoring your strategy to the format. It's an obvious tip. It seems like something you shouldn't have to say, but especially when we're talking about this kind of format, scoring matters because you're only drafting a team and then riding it throughout the season. You have to know the ins and outs of your scoring system. You have to know how it differs from others that you might be drafting in, and you have to know exactly how the competition is going to go, whether you're playing in a large field tournament, whether it's a smaller field tournament, whether it's a single league where you only have to beat 9 to 11 other teams. It all affects how you go about building your roster. And when you're doing best ball drafts, whether it's single league or a tournament, how you build your roster can matter as much as, or maybe even more than, the specific players in your format. So we're going to talk a lot about how to build that roster. What's the first tip that you have in mind?
Well, yeah, it's interesting too, because all these, to me, the three big best ball contests, Underdog, Drafters, and FFPC, they're all different scoring systems. They're all different starting lineup requirements. They're all different, formats as far as how you win the whole thing. Now, I think regardless of the format, chasing upside is key in best ball. And obviously we're talking about season-long upside, but in best ball in particular, weekly upside is more important. It's more valuable. Those players with big swings in weekly production are more valuable in best ball. In the lineup setting league, those weeks where they give you 3 points, they're still starting for you. You're getting 3 points. In best ball, those 3 points are probably just on your bench. You probably have someone else that scored better. So, those down weeks don't matter as much. The spike weeks still help you just as much. And to me, the bigger the best ball contest, the more you should prioritize upside. If you're in one of these contests with, 500,000 people, you need to build a beastly team. So you need to capture those guys that really crush their ADP.
And when you talk about upside, obviously, I think most people think of spike weeks, think of guys that have that ultimate ceiling, but you also have to deal with down weeks. I think upside can also refer to their full season opportunity and scoring, though. We're not just looking for guys who can have big weeks, but we'd love to land players who go later in your draft and yet have this path to become a weekly stud going forward. We'll talk about some more of those players later on, but that's another way to look at upside. And I think really one that can not only help in best ball, but can instruct how you draft on a typical lineup setting redraft team. Upside helps everywhere, basically. One final basic before we move on is knowing the difference between tournament and single league. If you are playing in a tournament, then you're not just drafting a single team every time. You're also building out a portfolio, and that can be more important than any individual roster. If you're playing in a tournament, it likely means that you are drafting many entries into that tournament, and it should, because you're playing against drafters that are doing a bunch of teams, putting a bunch of entries into that tournament. And the more that you add, the more shots you get at. Now, even if you're submitting a bunch of entries, each draft still stands on its own. So I'm not saying ignore that individual draft. Don't take advantage of what's there, but know that you're building a portfolio. If you take a guy on every single team in that tournament and that guy gets injured in August, then you're putting yourself in a worse position heading in than if you had spread it around. People talk about player exposures here. You have to pay attention to that. It's also important to vary your roster structure. If you do it the exact same way every time, 2 quarterbacks, 5 running backs, 8 wide receivers, 2, 3 tight ends, whatever your specific settings are, if you do the exact same thing every time, that only gives you a little bit of latitude in how you change things up. So make sure that you're not only watching your player exposures, but vary how you are building out those rosters. Let's move on now, Jared, to some core strategies for success in best ball. And I talked about that specific draft. Like I said, just because you're putting a bunch of entries into a tournament doesn't mean each draft itself doesn't matter. And one way to take advantage is to look for the value specific to a draft. Leverage what's there. Every draft is going to play out differently, even if it's a series of drafts into the same tournament. You're going to see players slide who didn't in another one. You're going to see drafters perform differently. You might get with a group that takes running backs earlier and wide receivers slide. You're far more likely to get with a group that pushes wide receivers up the board and leaves value at other spots. So it's fine to go into any draft with a plan. It's actually good to go in with a plan because it sets you up to at least get started. But you're going to have to be adaptable, because if you're determined to take wide receivers with your first 6 picks and everyone else is doing the same, then you wind up just taking the next guy as opposed to doing anything different that's ultimately going to make your team stand out, first in that pod and then beyond.
Yeah, and we'll get into individual positional strategies here for your best ball drafts, but that's the key point there. You need to be flexible. We'll start at quarterback. Again, so there's no one way to draft quarterback in best ball leagues. There's no right time to draft your first one. It all depends where value presents itself. If these top guys, Josh Allen slips into round 3, round 4, Jalen Hurts, Lamar Jackson, round 4 or 5, grab that value. The key thing here is that what you do at quarterback early in your draft should determine what you do late. So, for example, if you do draft a quarterback early, you should generally wait on your quarterback 2, and you should generally stop at just 2 quarterbacks if you drafted one early. If you wait on your quarterback 1, you probably want to target your quarterback 2 sooner, and you probably want to draft 3 quarterbacks overall. We actually have this concept built into our rankings. We call it our trust factor, and it basically weighs how much you should count on your quarterback and how much, insurance you need behind that guy. So just as examples, Patrick Mahomes, high trust factor. You kind of know what you're getting with that guy. You don't need to, draft a high quality quarterback 2 behind him. Anthony Richardson, kind of the other side of the spectrum here, a guy who we don't trust as much. You probably do want to get more insurance behind someone like Anthony Richardson. So again, that stuff is built into our rankings, built into the draft war room.
In best ball, how you draft your roster is important. It's more important than when you should take a quarterback or when you should take a tight end or when you should take whatever else. It's how you then build upon that after you've already made that pick that makes a difference. And you started with quarterback, but tight end is the other likely one starter position in those best ball lineups. Of course, it's a little bit different because your second tight end can fill your flex spot, but you still want to let, when you take that first tight end, instruct how you then take any more tight ends. If you take Travis Kelce early, if you take Sam Laporta early now, then you're going to want to wait longer. You're going to need to trust that guy more, because even though you can still make 3 tight ends make sense, what you're saying with your drafting by taking a stud early is, I think this guy is going to give me lots of value this season. That means giving you starter weeks almost all of the time. So what you need is just a smaller fill-in at that point. So keep that in mind as you're deciding how to build upon the single tight end. And like you said with quarterbacks, Jared, if you wait longer on tight end, then you can stack more of them up. Maybe you grab 2 of them in close succession in those middle rounds. Maybe you grab a third to try to make sure that you're maximizing those point weeks. How to know when you should take a quarterback or a tight end is tricky, and that's why we have the draft war room, even since it debuted as the MVP board. Like, that's been the key of it, is being able to compare all those positions, let you know how to value those players against each other. That was why it started with value-based drafting, so that you don't have to say, oh, I think it's time to take a quarterback. The draft war room's like, hey, dude, it's time to take a quarterback. It's this guy right here, because that's what the value says.
Yeah, we can say be adaptable and be fluid, be agile in your draft, but actually doing it is tricky, right? Actually knowing when and where that value is. The draft war room puts numbers to all of it, which makes it a lot easier to actually execute.
Yeah, now we talked about quarterback and tight end, of course, running back and wide receiver still to go. And you'll hear more specific running back strategies now than you ever used to, which makes sense because there are more drafters and more formats. There's still not one correct way to do it. It's all about knowing how to do it within the way that you are looking to do it. Now, specific RB strategies, we've got hero RB that has emerged recently, where you basically are taking one stud running back early, usually within the first 2 rounds, and then you take off running back for a while. You load up on the other spots because you've got your stud. You're going to ride him for as many starter weeks as he'll give you. And then later you can pile up options to fill in that RB2 slot, maybe to sneak into your flex spot in certain weeks. But whenever you take a stud player early, you're betting on him that season. If he crashes, if he gets injured early, then that team is in trouble. So you don't want to draft insurance to that team just in case that guy goes down. What you're doing is drafting more teams. The other entries in that tournament are that insurance. You can lose that roster and you still have a shot at the top prize because you have other rosters that don't have that stud running back. Zero RB takes that a little bit further, where you typically don't draft any running backs before at least round 7. The specifics there can vary by draft, but you're basically focusing on other positions for a while and then loading up late on running backs with some path to weekly success, whether it's handcuff types who need somebody to get hurt, or whether it's, receiving backs who aren't going to get regular workloads, but can have spike weeks whenever they find the end zone. Those are 2 popular running back strategies. There are plenty others that you can use, Jared. You can build a good roster with 2 running backs early in your draft, of course. If you are taking too early, make sure that you're waiting until much later, because, I talked about how drafting 1 running back early means that you are betting on that guy. If you draft too early, you're betting on those 2 to just be horses all season. Mm-hmm. So you want to forget about running back for a while. In that case, load up on wide receiver, and then later on you can add that insurance.
Yeah, as we keep saying, all these strategies can work depending on your draft, depending on the rules and the contest you're playing in. I will say, I think strategies like hero running back and especially zero running back are better for the big best ball contest because it's a more volatile strategy, right? A lot of these running backs you're drafting in the late rounds, even the middle rounds, might not do anything if they don't get an injury to a running back ahead of them on the depth chart. But if that injury does happen, these 10th round running backs can perform the same as 3rd and 4th round running backs. So something like zero running back I think is riskier, but it definitely increases your team's upside. So again, that's good for the big contests, not as good for something like if you're just playing in a contained 12-team best ball league.
And keep an eye if others in your draft are drafting a certain way. If you're in a room full of people going hero or zero RB, maybe there's a little bit of value in leaning the other way. So just keep that in mind and be ready to change your strategy in draft. Wide receivers, of course, related to running backs because you're focusing primarily on wide receiver if you're only starting with 1 or 0 running backs for a while. I think we don't have to talk about the importance of wide receivers in best ball at this point, Jared. Everybody gets it. Look at the ADP. All drafters are pushing wide receivers up earlier. I think a key point for wide receiver, though, is when you target them early, try to chase stud types at wide receiver. I think one mistake is looking at last year's numbers and seeing a guy as an emergent stud last year because of his fantasy production and ignoring maybe lower target share or higher touchdown rate just signals that he's not as reliable as those big fantasy numbers last year might have indicated.
Well, I think one of the big reasons to focus on wide receiver early is because they're relatively safer compared to running back. So if you're taking wide receivers early, make sure they're safe, make sure they're proven, make sure there's a reason that you love them so much going into this coming season. I want big volume with my early round wide receivers. I don't want guys that are reliant on touchdowns, reliant on big plays. I want guys that are, you're going to see 140, 150 targets in the coming season. Those are the wide receivers I want to spend my, first, second, third round picks on.
Yeah, and then the middle of the draft is where you're looking for wide receivers with breakout potential. Late in the draft, you can seek players who have shown talent and have a path to opportunity, but it's just not a clear path right now. You're looking, again, for that upside, not just weekly upside, but guys who maybe just one thing needs to break in their favor and they could explode.
Yeah, exactly. I think middle, late rounds is the time to chase guys that we might right now project for lower volume, guys that either have the potential to earn more volume with their play or just big play guys. Gabe Davis obviously comes to mind. He's never going to be a high volume guy, but the type of receiver he is, the downfield ability, the red zone ability, those are the types that it's fine to chase those types in the middle, late rounds of your draft.
Stacking has become vital with the boom of best ball. Basically, what you're doing is putting teammates together to maximize the value from their production. And of course, that starts with quarterbacks and their pass catchers. That's the most obvious way to stack because then when there is a touchdown pass, you get the quarterback's points and the receiver's points. Looking beyond that, I think, is good at this point because everybody who's drafting a best ball team should know that you should try to stack quarterbacks and wide receivers. You can also get benefit from stacking pass catchers on the same team, even if you don't have their quarterback, especially if you're targeting a good pass offense. Yep. The logic is somebody's likely to pay off in any given week. Maybe I don't know who it's going to be every week. So I get a couple of those wide receivers and I'm getting the points each week, regardless of whose turn it is to put up numbers. Similarly, there are some backfields where combining running backs from the same team makes sense. You don't want to get handcuffs behind starters because then you're necessarily taking a downgrade on your team when the starter goes down to that backup, as opposed to, adding value when some other emergent player steps in. Situations where I think it makes sense to stack running backs. Miami is one. Raheem Mostert's going much later than he should be if you just look at his scoring last year, and I think that makes him stackable with Devon Achane, who is going much earlier. Tennessee, We've got both Tony Pollard and Tyjae Spears going outside the top 24 as we speak. And that's a key here is we're not looking to stack early running backs because the earlier they go, the more you need them to pay off. We want to look outside that range to guys on the same team that can, take turns being the scorers. Denver is one more I want to mention. Javonte Williams, only RB 31 on Underdog right now. So you can bet on Javonte Williams and you don't even need to fully bet on him. You can take Jaleel McLaughlin to go with him. And now you're getting potential Denver running back points weekly, regardless of who does it. I'll say the final point on that, like the mini point, is if you are pairing Denver running backs or some similar situation, you don't want to pair Williams with Audric Estime because if you're betting Javonte Williams scores big this year, that includes short yardage, it includes touchdowns. Yep. That's the stuff that Estime is going to do if he pays off. So those two are at odds with each other. So that gets back to the thinking about how your roster comes together.
Yeah, for sure. Think through all this stuff. I think price always matters with this stuff. Opportunity cost. I love the Denver example because those guys are cheap because Sean Payton's backfields generally produce a lot of fantasy points. There's question marks at wide receiver and at tight end in Denver. So that one makes a lot of sense. Just going back to stacking multiple pass catchers without a quarterback, I think you got to be careful with that one, especially in the big tournaments. I think you obviously want it to be a good passing offense. I think you need it to be a concentrated passing offense too, an offense where it's going to be 2, maybe 3 guys accounting for most of the receiving production. I think the Rams obviously stick out. I think Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua, you can draft both those guys without drafting Matt Stafford. That could work for you.
Mm-hmm. Now, there is also game stacking that has emerged with the playoff week format in best ball. That's when you draft guys who are facing each other in week 17 because you are hoping that your team gets to that round 17 final, and then you can get both sides of a matchup that explodes. That's something that came to best ball from DFS. It makes sense logically. Just don't overdo it because if you are playing in those tournaments, most people are looking to do that. So I think that can lead to reaching to make those stacks happen. And sometimes the better way is to just not reach for that and take the better players and you wind up with the better team because they don't have to be in the same game in week 17 to both have good week 17s. If you're looking to stack otherwise, if you're looking to stack teammates, the Draft War Room highlights those stacking options as you draft. Once you draft a player, his teammates are going to get labeled the rest of the way. And we've got different shades of green to show importance. We talked about quarterback and wide receiver. That's obviously a more important stack than quarterback and running back or running back and running back. So we want you to know where teammates are, but we also want you to know which stacks matter more. And you can see those quickly when you're looking at your draft war room. Advanced draft techniques. Like I said, Jared, the more people drafting, the more ways to draft, the more advanced you have to get with your thinking. It all starts with paying attention to ADP because that matters even more for best ball than it does for redraft, I'd say, because you're drafting not only against a league of drafters here, you're drafting against a market. You need to look at where guys are going, where you can get them, and where you can change things up to try to differentiate that entry into that particular tournament.
Yeah, I mean, you can be profitable in best ball, I think, with a big portfolio just by beating ADP, meaning by drafting this guy at this average price, which is cheaper than the rest of the market, is drafting a man. I think that's a big thing to consider, too, if you're drafting throughout the year in best ball. Leverage those fluctuations in ADP, right? Like we talked about player exposures before. Think of this as building a stock portfolio. You want to be buying guys at their cheapest ADP. You want to be selling guys, or in this case, fading guys, not drafting guys when they're most expensive. You can kind of read that. If you can say, okay, I think this guy's ADP is going to climb in August. Let's draft him now. Let's not draft him in August. That's a way, just by doing that, even if you don't nail your, player takes, your rankings, I think you can be profitable in best ball just by kind of understanding the market and where these guys are going to move in ADP.
Yeah, that's a key. It's not easy to do, but it will help you if you're able to do it. Another thing that's not always easy is taking advantage of recency bias. I mean, drafters have certainly got smarter on whole. I'm not sure humans have, and that's where recency bias comes in, is you can every year find examples. You look at ADP right now and you will see them. Examples of the market overrating and underrating players based just on last year's stats. So look for spots where you can see that happening. If you don't like him as much as where the market has him, then he's a good player to pass on. And if you like him more than where the market has him, maybe he's a target for you. And if that pays off, then you're taking advantage. So no recency bias, look for that and try to look for it in yourself. Try to understand how you're viewing a player and whether you're justified in liking or disliking a player as much as you do.
Yeah, and I think that recency bias is exactly what we're trying to defeat with our best ball rankings, which, these start with our baseline projections or baseline player rankings, which we do, spend hundreds of hours, breaking down these players and their situations heading into the season. But then we're also factoring in season-long upside and downside. We're boosting players with big weekly volatility. Again, someone like Gabe Davis, you're going to find him higher in our best ball rankings than our season-long redraft rankings because of the type of player he is. So again, all that stuff is factored into the best ball rankings on Draft Sharks.
Yeah. So another thing that's in that draft war room is ceiling, is upside mode later in your draft. And that's going to point us toward guys like Puka Nacua and Kyron Williams last year. And I bring up those names not to say, let's highlight the players who are going to be the next Puka Nacua and the next Kyron Williams, because that's a mistake. It goes back to the old adage of, if you give a man a fish, you feed him for a day. If you teach him how to fish, you feed him forever. So we want to not look at, this player fits what made Puka Nacua good last year. We want to look at what made Puka Nacua good last year, so we know what areas to look at. First of all, nobody is likely to have that kind of season. Day 3 picks don't just come out and turn into superstars immediately. Even Amon-Ra St. Brown took more than half of his rookie season to become Amon-Ra St. Brown. So don't just look for a player who's the next Puka. Jared, what can people look for that might steer them toward the types of players that they can take shots on?
Yeah, I think it's always talent and or situation that creates breakouts, right? And Puka last year had both of them, and that's how you get a Puka breakout season at the price he was going at. But he had the talent, and I think talent can either be, you can either see it on paper on the numbers, you can see it on the film. And I think there were plenty of people that like Puka's film heading into last season. There was plenty to like about the numbers. I know yards per route run is a metric we like to use, and Puka Nacua was very strong in that department in college. So the talent was obviously there, and the situation was there for Puka in a Sean McVay passing game that has always been good. It has always featured the wide receivers in his passing game. Sean McVay's offense has produced a ton of strong fantasy producers at wide receiver. So again, I think you want to look for guys ideally that have both of those. Those are tough to find in late round picks. But if you can find someone going late that either has, you think, underrated talent or an underrated situation, that's a good candidate to break out this coming season.
And Kyron Williams, of course, also played for Sean McVay last year. And similarly, we shouldn't look at, round 17 of your draft and think those are the 3 guys that might be Kyron Williams this year, because you're just not going to find a workhorse in round 17, most likely. Now, I think the best takeaway from what happened with Kyron Williams last year is not so much looking at what you think of the player, because really there was no reason at this point last year to be excited about Kyron Williams, the player. I think the key takeaway is to consider contingent scenarios and effects. And I think that it can fit here regardless of how you felt about Cam Akers heading into last season, because he was expected to be the lead Rams back. If you liked Cam Akers, then part of why you liked him is probably that you liked the Rams offense, you liked Rams running backs. So even if you believed in Cam Akers leading that backfield, you should say, maybe Cam Akers gets hurt. So his handcuff is also going to make sense. I'm going to put him on some teams just in case something happens to Cam Akers. This is one situation, but carry the same thing over other situations. If a team environment is one reason you like a running back, then it should be a reason that you make yourself like the backup to some degree. If you didn't like Cam Akers last year, then that's even more of a reason to go after Kyron Williams, unless you just thought that the Rams were going to be awful last year. And you probably shouldn't have, because they had talent, even if you didn't like the running backs. So if you didn't believe in Cam Akers, then take the next guy on the depth chart. A lot of people thought that was Zach Evans. I wasn't one of those people. And I think the takeaway there is to maybe not overtrust a 6th round pick, Kimani Vidal this year. No matter how much you might like the individual player, take shots on multiple backups on that roster. If you don't know which one to choose, take one on one roster, take one on another roster. That way you're covered no matter who the guy is that breaks through, because there will be times where it's not the guy that any of us is expecting. And ultimately, like I started with, whether you liked Kyron Williams, the player, mattered less than realizing the upside of the situation. So going forward, Jared, that's going to be my takeaway is I don't think a whole lot of that player, but I like his situation. I like the chance he has of getting opportunity. So I want to get some exposure just in case he's better than what I think he is.
For me, this all circles back to diversification and getting exposure to different players, not being overexposed to any one player, because we can do all this research, we can watch all this film, do whatever, but let's not pretend we know what's going to happen in the coming NFL season, right? So even if you liked Cam Akers last year, like you said, you liked him because of Sean McVay's history with his backfield, so you definitely should have been taking some shots on those other guys, not feeling overconfident in any one outcome.
Now, you have biases, you have lots of things to think about as you draft. It makes it difficult and it can make you miss things. And really, that's why we have the Draft War Room available. It's why we live sync with your best ball drafts, keep pace with all of the picks as they come off the board, give you customized recommendations as we go. And this year, we have built it out for best ball use. We've got best ball factor in there, which we've all heard the phrase, he's better in best ball or he's not as good in best ball. That's what best ball factor seeks to highlight. It adds a bit to those players who give you spike weeks, who are going to annoy you if you're setting a lineup every week, but are going to help you if you're just taking a lineup where you automatically get their points and miss their down weeks. We've got that stack optimizer that I mentioned, which highlights those teammates and shows you the level of importance, just so you know quickly as you go. You don't miss, crap, I didn't realize that guy was still on the board. Got a little reminder there just so you can tell that he's still available. And then those ceiling projections and upside mode. We talked about chasing upside at all levels of the draft. That's what our ceiling projections are looking to do at any point. That's what upside mode is looking to do. It automatically turns on during your draft, earlier if it's a best ball draft than a straight lineup setting draft. You can turn it on or off whenever you want if you want to see a different view. But what upside mode does is take into account those ceiling projections, take into account the likelihood of players hitting those ceilings, and it boosts guys that have that upside, because that's the ultimate difference maker in really all formats, but especially in best ball. If you hit on that Kyren Williams, if you hit on that Puka Nacua in the late rounds, that can propel you to the top of the tournament, to the big money. So no matter what type of best ball contest you are drafting into, we're ready to help. We've got adaptable rankings and the most powerful draft assistant in the industry. Visit draftsharks.com now to customize your draft war room and take care of your best ball drafts.